April 12th, 2018. Thank you for your patience. We did have a joint hearing with the Department of Building, or the Building Inspection Commission, earlier today. Please be advised that the Commission does not tolerate any disruption or outbursts of any kind. If you could please silence your mobile devices that may sound off during these proceedings, and when speaking before the Commission, if you care to, do state your name for the record. I'd like to take roll at this time. Commission Vice President Melgar.
Here.
Commissioner Fong. Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Koppel.
Here.
Commissioner Moore.
Here.
And Commissioner Richards.
Here.
Commission President Hillis will be absent. Commissioners, first on your agenda is consideration of items proposed for continuance. Item 1, case number 2016-010185 CUA at 160 Caselli Avenue. This is a conditional use authorization that is proposed for continuance to May 10th, 2018. I have no speaker cards.
Would any member of the public care to comment on this item? Pull it off. Okay, commissioners? Commissioner Moore?
Move to continue item 1 to May 10th, 2018.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion to continue item 1 to May 10th, Commissioner Fong?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Richards? And Commission Chair Melgar.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 6-0. It places us under Commission Matters. Item 2, consideration of adoption draft minutes for March 22nd, 2018 and March 29th, 2018.
Commissioner Moore?
I did not press the button. I was
No,
left.
okay.
Oh, thank you.
Commissioner Richards, I think we need to ask for public comment.
We do need to request for.
Would any member of the public care to comment on the draft minutes? Okay, Commissioner Richards.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion, then, to adopt the minutes for March 22nd and March 29th of this year, Commissioner Fong?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
And Commission Chair Melgar.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 6-0 and places us on item 3, Commission comments and questions.
Commissioner Richards.
Interestingly enough, it's been a very busy week, as Commissioner Johnson said, news-wise. We actually missed 2 weeks. We weren't here last week. But I hope that the department, in the keeping with what we were talking about, would reanalyze the amendments to Senator Wiener's bill. I think it's good that we know the impact to the city, and it's fair for us to continue to evolve with the amendments as they go to understand what they are and how they impact us. The other one is, while we were away, there was this article, Portals of the Past. It's an interesting kind of thing in the Chronicle every week in the Bay Area section. Last week, the title was Lively, Lengthy Battle Over Where to Bury the City's Dead. And I don't know if anybody remembers, but we used to have cemeteries, garden cemeteries in the city. There's very few places left to bury anybody, I guess, in the 30s and 40s. But a paragraph in the lengthy battle over whether to exhume everybody and move them to Colma struck me. And it said, people were writing into the letters to the editor, and they said, the people that wanted the cemeteries removed were recent arrivals who had no respect for the city's past or its elders. So it just made me feel like, hey, this is 2018, and we have the same thing for old people who are coming new to the city. They don't respect the past, so we can't change anything. So there's a lot of parallels in the growth of San Francisco to what's happening today as we continue to grow. And lastly, we talked about construction costs and their impact on the ability to actually build or have a project pencil out. Interesting that Matty and Ross had a column on a Muni platform at Chase Center. I guess that's the Warriors Arena, I guess. Okay, I'm not up on my branding. $33 million, it's $160,000 a foot, but they're worried nobody's going to bid on it because there's not enough workers and there's too much business to actually bid on a $33 million platform. So I think that's a comment. It says a lot about what's going on in terms of the scarcity of the ability to put some of these projects through because there's not enough workers to do it. Thanks.
If there's nothing further, Commissioners, we can move on to Department Matters. Item 4, Director's Announcements.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The only announcement was to let the Commissioners know that we, in fact, are looking at I think it's the third version of SB 825. I think we're having a hearing on the 26th, I believe, in about 2 weeks on. So you will receive a memo in next week's packet. And just to ask if there's anything in particular that you are interested in with that legislation, let us know so that we can make sure we include it in time for the packet for next week. Thanks. That's all I have today.
Commissioner Richards?
I think I mentioned this in the building inspection joint hearing. The interplay of the different laws and their ability to allow local control on demolitions was a concern of mine. So Housing Accountability Act, how can you have maybe two laws apply to the same project?
Item 5, review of past events at the Board of Supervisors. There was nothing of interest to the Commission from the Board of Appeals, and there was no Historic Preservation Commission hearing yesterday.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Aaron Starr, Manager of Legislative Affairs. This report does cover 2 weeks since you were on break last week. Last week's Land Use Committee didn't have any planning-related items. However, this week the committee considered a resolution on San Francisco's biodiversity policy, sponsored by Supervisors Fewer and Kim. The resolution focused on efforts to build on 35 years of helpful but disconnected policy work to support biodiversity, and evaluate the issues to a citywide, or elevate the issues to a citywide priority. The resolution also adopts a citywide biodiversity vision and names 14 city agencies that are to be a part of that vision. San Francisco planning staff have been fully engaged in this effort and reviewed the resolution language along the way. At a land use hearing, 10 people spoke during public comment. Speakers included representatives from the Sierra Club, the Presidio Trust, and Literacy for Environmental Justice. Managers from the PUC, Rec Park, the Port, and the Public Library also spoke in support of both the resolution and the interagency collaboration co-led by San Francisco Environment and Planning. The committee members added one amendment requested from Supervisor Safai that is intended to clarify expectations of priorities on city-owned land. Supervisor Kim and Safai also raised questions from their constituents, such as whether or not the biodiversity resolution would increase conflicts with public access, removal of non-native trees, and pesticide-herbicide use. Director Raphael and the San Francisco Environment Integrated Pest Management Lead responded to concerns and clarified that the resolution does not impact Natural Areas Plan or the Integrated Pest Management Ordinance. In the end, the committee unanimously passed the resolution and sent it to the full board. At the full board last week, a Mills Act contract for 60 Carmelita Street was adopted. The General Plan, Planning Code, Zoning Map, and Development Agreements for 200 Van Ness passed their first read. And a resolution urging amendments to California Senate State Bill 827, sponsored by Senator Wiener, was adopted. And the appeal for the environmental determination for 590 Leland was continued to this week. At the full board this week, the 200 Van Ness project passed its second read, and so is off to the mayor for a signature. And the 590 Leland environmental appeal was continued for one more week to April 16th. Last week, there were 2 introductions of note. The first one was from Supervisor Safai. It's an amendment to the definition of accessory use to allow catering as an accessory use to limited restaurants. And then we also have a ordinance that would prohibit cannabis retail and medical cannabis dispensaries in Chinatown. That is sponsored by Supervisors Peskin, Kim, Breed, Tang, and Fewer. So you all will have a fun time with that one in a few months. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Sar. Commissioner Richards.
Just one quick question. I watched the Board of Supervisors hearing on SB 827, and there were like 2 votes. Can you explain what happened?
I believe one was to add an amendment to it or to amend it, and then the final vote was to recommend it or to adopt it.
And the amendment was to
I think
amend
it
it?
softened some of the language in it. I don't have the exact amendment in here, but I can probably find it for you.
Okay. I know, Mr. David, maybe when you do public comment, you can mention it to us. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Starr.
Seeing nothing further, Commissioners, we can go to general public comment at this time. Members of the public may address the Commission on items of interest to the public that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission, except agenda items. With respect to agenda items, your opportunity to address the Commission will be afforded When the item is reached in the meeting, each member of the public may address the commission for up to 3 minutes. I have no speaker cards.
Afternoon, Mr. David.
Good afternoon. Todd David on behalf of the San Francisco Housing Action Coalition. So what happened at the Board of Supervisors is that out of the Land Use Commission, there was a vote to change Supervisor Peskin's opposition letter to a let's ask Senator Wiener to amend.
Okay.
SB 827. So out of Land Use Commission, an amend recommendation came to the Board of Supervisors. So what happened to the Board of Supervisors is that Supervisor Peskin then said, I don't want to move forward with an amend letter. I want to move forward with an opposition letter. So the first vote at the Board of Supervisors was to amend the amend letter to an opposition letter.
Okay.
And then the second vote was whether to approve the opposition letter. So that's where it. So the other thing I just want to take the time. So as we've been talking about, SB 827 was amended this week, and I just wanted to give a couple of highlights. I'm not going to get into too many details. So, but a couple of things that it changed is that it established inclusionary rules for any jurisdiction that would use SB 827 that does not currently have an inclusionary rule. So you would not be able to use SB 827. It has stronger demolition controls, mainly around that if there's been an Ellis Act in a building for the past 5 years, it could not be demolished and be for SB 8727. The height restrictions, the height was changed. They removed the 85-foot height, and so it's now just 45 feet and 55 feet. So what that really means in San Francisco is that the most any area would be upzoned is basically 10 feet. So there's that. And then I think kind of really most interestingly is there's a delay implementation until 2021. So it says that it's basically giving local jurisdictions the opportunity to do this themselves until 2021, and then if it's not done, then SB 827. And just there was also another big event that happened this week is that 17 national housing rights advocates and civil rights advocates endorsed SB 827, and it kind of got hidden a little bit in a lot of the other things that were going on. And one of those people who did endorse it is Richard Rothstein, who is the author. We usually just refer to the book as The Color of Law, but I think it's worth it to say the whole title, The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. And so he's endorsed it. And when he's not writing books, his day job is he's a senior fellow emeritus at the Thurgood Marshall Institute of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and at the Haas Institute at Berkeley. So a fairly significant endorsement in my mind. Thank you.
Hi, Laura Clark, Gimby Action. Just following up on a lot of what Todd said about endorsements that have come in for SB 827. Additionally, this morning, the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California, one of the largest organizations of nonprofit affordable housing developers in the state, has endorsed SB 827. They are excited about how much affordable housing this is going to mean statewide, that they are going to get to build, as well as others. So I will be sending all of you the letter from the Fair Housing Advocates as well as the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California. These are very significant endorsements of a very powerful piece of legislation that is going to right a lot of historic wrongs. Additionally, it's worth noting that there are other places like Minneapolis that are considering upzoning everything to fourplexes throughout their own city. And so if San Francisco wants to hold on to the idea that we can upzone and we don't need the state to do it, then it needs to get serious about that. That we could do something here in this city. We could get rid of single-family home-only zoning. This body has the ability to make those kinds of decisions. But it seems to me that no one has upzoned Geary Boulevard. We've talked about it a lot, but it hasn't happened. And so while I respect that we might like our local programs, it doesn't seem to be happening at the pace that it needs to. Thank you.
If there's nothing further, Commissioners, we can move on to your regular calendar. For item 6, case number 2018-000811 CUA at 100 Barneveld Avenue and 125 Bayshore Boulevard. This is a conditional use authorization.
Good afternoon, Planning Commission. I'm Ella Simonsky, Planning Department staff. The item before you is a request for a conditional use authorization to establish a homeless shelter with an accessory social service use, commonly known as a navigation center, at a vacant property at 125 Bayshore Boulevard, 100 Barneveld. It has two addresses because it has two frontages. The city is required to open no fewer than 6 navigation centers, which must be temporary in duration and owned, leased, or operated by the city and county of San Francisco. The proposed navigation center would be approximately 24,000 square feet and would provide 128 shelter beds, community rooms, laundry, storage, and open space for use by the residents of the shelter, as well as workspace for social service providers and the navigation center staff to provide counseling, services, and meals to the residents of the shelter. The project would involve tenant improvements to the existing office building and warehouse, construction of approximately 1,600 square foot deck, and the placement of 2 trailers containing modular restrooms and shower facilities on site. The Navigation Center would operate for up to 4 years with an additional time for both construction and removal of the facility, after which the site would return to its prior use. In order to proceed, the project requires the conditional use authorization for the homeless shelter within a production, distribution, and repair zoning district. To date, the Planning Department has received communications from 2 neighborhood businesses in opposition to the project, with concerns that a nearby homeless shelter might affect their patronage and might lead to an increase in neighborhood nuisances such as trash and crime. In addition, the department has also received letters of support from a neighborhood business owner and the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition, which believe the Navigation Center and its mission will help a number of people off the street and will benefit the community and the neighborhood. The Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing has conducted community meetings, neighborhood business outreach, and presented at the Board of Supervisors Budget and Finance hearing and the Bayview Hunters Point Community Advisory Committee. In summary, the department finds the project to be necessary, desirable, and compatible with the surrounding neighborhood for the following reasons. It would create a navigation center with 128 shelter beds for homeless residents of the city. The project would offer health, mental health, benefits, and other services, as well as intensive case management to assist people into permanent or temporary housing. It would be operated by the City and County of San Francisco and managed by the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing in partnership with a community-based nonprofit. The homeless shelter would be a temporary use of no more than 4 years, and there would be no permanent loss of PDR space. And finally, the project would not displace any existing business, residence, or public facility. This concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I have 2 speaker cards on this item, Peggy House and Dell Seymour. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Is there a project sponsor? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Emily Cohen with the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing, and I have some slides to share with you. Just wanted to join you this afternoon to share a little bit more detail about the project and address any questions. As Ella said, this is, we have plans to make 125 Bayshore a navigation center. This would be our 6th navigation center. There are 4 currently open under the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing and 1 currently open under the Department of Public Health. As you are well aware, San Francisco faces a homeless crisis in our community. On any given night, we estimate there are about 7,500 people experiencing homelessness in our community, and about 4,300 of those folks are living unsheltered. Those are the clientele of this future navigation center. As stated in this slide deck, we have about 1,200 regular shelter beds available, any given night, and about 355 navigation center beds. There are currently approximately 1,100 people on our shelter waiting list. The Board of Supervisors in February passed an emergency ordinance declaring, a state of emergency around homelessness and encouraging us to move more quickly and giving us some tools to move more quickly to open sites like 125 Bayshore. So for folks who are unfamiliar with what a navigation center is, it is similar to a shelter in that it is a residential facility for people experiencing homelessness, but it's a much more service-intense environment and a lower threshold community, meaning that we have learned from people on the streets who may not have wanted to go to a shelter traditionally, as well as people living in shelters, that there are some things that could be improved upon. Pets, partners, and possessions are sort of the things that navigation centers are known for. We don't tell people they need to get rid of their stuff before they come. They can come with their pets, they can come with their partners, and it's really about honoring the dignity of everyone in our community and treating them with the utmost respect through the environment in which we're serving them. And I think navigation centers really hit that. They really do that well. The high staffing ratios, high case management support, and a beautiful facility. We've worked with the Department of Public Works on all of our existing navigation centers, and they've done a wonderful job creating safe and welcoming spaces for everyone. So I'm not going to go through each of these slides, a lot of detail here for you. Just wanted to point out that this site was part of the 1,000-person project that Mayor Lee charged us with back in November. Mayor Lee came to our staff meeting and said, you guys need to get 1,000 more people off the streets, 1,000 more than you would have already served, and get to it. And I have to say that type of leadership and charge really made a big difference. And we have a number of projects in the pipeline that will help us reach that goal, and 125 Bayshore is a really important part of that equation, as well as the pending navigation centers at Division Circle and 5th and Bryant Streets. Your slides have some floor plans from 125 Bayshore, and Julia Lowy from the Department of Public Works is here who can answer any specific construction-related questions for you guys. The initial focus for this navigation center will be the surrounding areas, and we know that there has traditionally been a large encampment at the Hairball. There's been some significant encampments in the area, sort of where D9 and 10 come together, and that will be the initial priority for this site. Some specifics about the operations of a navigation center: 24-hour staffing, 24-hour operations, and 24-hour come and go, which means that there's never a line out front. There's no reason for somebody to wait out front of a navigation center. Navigation centers are accessed by invitation only. Folks are outreached to on the street and invited to a navigation center. So there's often community concern: is there going to be a line? Is there going to be loitering in front? And there's no need for that. There's ample outdoor space within the facility, and people are invited in. There's no just walking up and asking to come into a navigation center, which does help alleviate that pressure on the neighborhood. Obviously, 24-hour activation, lighting. There's some pictures on slide 15 that shows what the outside will look like after Public Works is done with their work, and I think it will really be a benefit to the community. As was mentioned before, navigation centers include dorms, bathrooms and showers, laundry, dining and community spaces, client storage, and social service space, all of which will be on site. You can see there's, in the slides 11, 12, more images of what the navigation center is planned to look like, as well as a great image of some of the art that we're looking to have on the outside, which is in slide 15. Slide 13 just shows a before and after picture of an encampment resolution, and just want to drive home that navigation centers are a really important tool for us to resolve street homelessness and to resolve encampments in our community. When we go out and resolve an encampment, we make an offer, a genuine offer of a safe place to go for people, and that is these navigation centers. And so we really rely on them in order to do our work of bringing people in off of the street. And the last part of the slides, which I won't read to you, but is there, that describes our good neighbor policy and how we and our nonprofit contractor work with the neighborhood around us. And I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen.
Thank you.
With that, we will hear from the public. Peggy House, Dell Seymour, and I have Melody. Any other members of the public for whom I don't have speaker cards, please feel free to line up and come up when you're ready.
Hi, my name is Dell Seymour. I chair the Local Homeless Coordinating Board upstairs. I just want to correct one statement that Emily made, that the Navigation Center is a tool. Navigation Center is a whole toolkit. It's an all-around step up for homelessness. I actually spent 18 years in the city of San Francisco's homeless shelter system, and I moved from there into an SRO. I moved from there into supported housing, and now I have my own home. So it is a step up. It's a necessary step up. And we need about 35 of these. So I'm not only speaking for this one, but I'm speaking for the next 34 that's going to come before you in the next few years. Some of the ones that we have now, existing ones, will retire, and we'll need to think about placing other sites in. And if you have any qualms about this, come out. You know, it's one of my duties on the local homeless coordinating board is to be at the encampment resolutions at 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning in South of Market. Come out to one of those. Come out to one of those. If you have any idea that we may not need this one or another one, come out to one of those. See the look on these people's faces. The look is, where am I going? What am I going to do? Do you know we have 4 people over 90 years old sleeping on our streets? And this is San Francisco, California. We got to do better, and it starts right here. The ball is, and I understand, I have a feeling that you will approve this, so I'm speaking to the choir, and I realize that. I will not disrespect you by advocating and yelling and screaming, because I already know what your heart is. I've been before this microphone before. So I'll prematurely thank you for your consideration, and remember, there's about 34 more coming. Thank you. Thank you this afternoon.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Pull this down a little bit. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. My name is Peggy House. My mother's parents, Joe and Margaret, bought a house at 66 Lafayette Street in the early 1930s. I was raised there. My mother still lives there. We've been here a long time. I own and operate a small business called All Seas Wholesale. We are at 2390 Gerald. We are across the street from the proposed project. I didn't know about it until I got a letter in the mail. Our company pays payroll and gross receipts. We pay property tax. We pay business licensing fees, weights and measures registration fees to the city and county of San Francisco. My team starts at 3 a.m. preparing the finest seafood to be delivered to businesses in the Bay Area. All of us come to work and must park on the street, in public parking. In the more than 30 years that I've been in business, the parking issue has never been easy. With the increase in the population of mobile homes, it's nearly impossible. In the past 5 years, the homeless population has exploded into the streets around our business. The Chronicle states, and I quote, "California is the home of 25% of the country's total homeless population. They have become a hardship, a health hazard, and a problem to Team All Seas, making it difficult to do business at our current location. The mobile homes and the vehicles monopolize the parking. Their garbage is discarded onto our sidewalks, and the defecation on the sidewalk is not from dogs, as my video cameras prove. The impact is being felt by us. There's also a further impact that you're planning, which is a bike lane, which will take all the parking away from the front of our business. Now, with this project, I'm led to believe that the working people, the taxpayers, have no consideration in the eyes of the city. The conversation cannot just be about homeless citizens. We must include the working, tax-paying citizens in this conversation. We support the economy. With all this said, I have questions. What considerations have been made for the businesses in the area, specifically parking, public safety, and public cleanliness? It's a very industrial area. There's lots of trucks coming and going all day long. The produce market is just blocks from us. We have 18 vehicles coming and going all day. With this, I close from an author, a professor of public policy from Brandeis University, Robert Kuttner. You can't ignore the plight of ordinary working people at the same time that you're asking voters to open their hearts to immigrants and to other claimants for social justice. It's asking too much of the people whose living standards have gone down the drain to expect them to be liberal on social issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi. Laura Clark, Yimby Action. Housing human beings is more important than parking. And I'm going to say that again. Housing human beings is more important than parking. And I think that this body needs to embody that decision every day in every decision that you make. Housing human beings is more important than parking. 70% almost of our homeless population were housed in San Francisco before becoming homeless. These are our people that we have failed through a series of poor public policy decisions. We cannot continue to fail them. What I actually wanted to speak about was if we continue to force navigation centers to require CUs and a lot of other process that has been put onto them, we will continue to only see navigation centers in former industrial areas and low-income places where people will be fighting them less, and we will continue to not have every district do their fair share to house our homeless population. And we need to think about how process enables people to keep the needy out of their neighborhood. And so I think you should all think very carefully about reforming the process to ensure that every district is doing their fair share. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Melody, and I'm homeless, and I live on the street. And quite a while ago, there was all of these homeless people living under the freeway, which is called the Hairball. Those people were being hosed down at 4 a.m., and they had to get all their stuff out, dripping wet. And this happened repeatedly. Eventually, over time, those people were moved out of that area. Where did they go? They went to my block. Those people are still there. At the beginning of the year, all the people on 3 blocks, like branching off of like where I stay, were swept and put into Navigation Center. And starting Monday of this last week, they're all back on this street. So the navigation centers, from what I understand, are only a 30 to 90-day turnaround. These navigation centers are only a revolving door. They don't relieve homelessness. And I've been asking Emily Cohen today for the numbers of how many people went into Navigation Center, and of those people, when they do a sweep, how many of them exited into permanent housing? Because the people that I've spoken with on my block that went into Navigation Center, bad things happened to them while they were there. And one of the things that I wanted to say is that you cannot pay another human being to care about another human being. And these navigation centers look great on paper, but the people that are back on my block, they don't feel like they were cared about at all. And there is probably more, but I'm going to stop now. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Melody. Next speaker, please.
Sue Hester, resident of South Side of Bernal Heights since 1987. I'm very familiar with this area. I support this navigation center as a part of the solution. It's only a part. Staff people in the audience, there is a major problem going underneath the freeway. The connection is from Potrero to Bayshore Avenue. It goes down. it's, to put it mildly, poorly lit. People pushing their carts to find out they're going to go from this area of the Mission to this navigation center. There's no sidewalks. It's poorly lit. Please be obstructionist to Caltrans and make them light under the freeway because it's Caltrans property. If DPW has to do it to embarrass Caltrans, do it. The lighting is a travesty. And I literally am scared every time I drive down that stretch, and I drive down it a couple of times a week, because you can't see people. Pushing their carts really is dangerous. So we need to have a navigation center, and we need really to pay attention to the ongoing housing problem beyond the navigation center and making this entire area as safe as possible to walk to. Because one of the things that I know about all the homeless people, they're pedestrians. People don't drive to a homeless shelter. And so you should take really careful attention. Safety issues, pedestrians, homeless people need to have safe walking. I want to end with this just as a plea. I live in this area. I know exactly what this area is because I drive to the post office to my house probably twice a week, and this is the route I take. This is an area that needs attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hester. Any other public comment on this item? Okay, with that, public comment is closed. Commissioner Moore.
Ms. Cohen, if I may, I have a couple of questions for you. Could you explain to the Commission why the operation for the center is only targeted to be 6 years maximum?
The operations for this particular site?
That's correct.
So the legislation that the Board of Supervisors passed does define a navigation center as a temporary program, as well as the conditional use permit putting limitations on the length of time that we can operate this site as a navigation center. So we have other sites that will be in operation longer, but that's the duration for this particular site.
I want to bring that into the context of two things you said. One is that Mayor Lee had the noble goal of establishing 1,000 beds. This is a small fraction of the 1,000 beds. And I do not believe that we will be miraculously creating the goal in just a year, which means that the retention of facilities should at least try to help reach the target, not exceed it, but reach it in a manner that centers don't go out of operation while we're then struggling to have a deficit of what we're trying to do. The second point I would like to ask about is I was not actually, I most likely had forgotten that the turnaround time, as was just presented to us in a rather moving fashion, is only 30 to 90 days, which makes some people who are not able to really find themselves and solutions for their own specific situation will find themselves back on the streets. I find that very alarming because there is then, in the end, not a real net reduction, but a recycling. Do you have a percentage? And percentages are just statistics, not really reflecting on the severity of where we are. What is the percentage of people who you are able to successfully return to living in the community under different conditions than even what a navigation center offers?
Great. Thank you so much for asking that question so I can clarify. So first I wanted to put out another number. So when we go and we do resolve an encampment, we have between a 65 and 70% take-up rate. So 65 to 70% of the people living in encampments accept the offer of a navigation center bed. That is very high for encampment resolution, and therefore, really begs the need for expanded navigation centers and shelter beds. And then once folks are inside, I have some data here that I can share. sorry, it's on my phone, it's a little small. About 14% of all the people who have been in the navigation centers are currently there right now and are receiving services. 54% have exited with positive exits, so have exited to housing or another residential facility. So it's 54% of the folks we've served have had positive exits into the community. And then in terms of how long people can stay and what kind of beds there are actually 4 types of navigation center beds. So we have a couple of beds in the system for folks who are using our Homeward Bound program, and so they're only going to stay 1 or 2 nights. And this is our our transportation and family reunification program. So if somebody is traveling home to another part of the country but needs a place to stay for a night while they're getting ready to travel, we reserve a few beds within our navigation center system for that population. Additionally, we have a handful of beds that are emergency beds. These are 7-night beds that the police can bring people to in the middle of the night, or if a homeless outreach worker finds somebody in distress and the shelter is full, they can bring somebody there for these emergency beds. And again, that is a small carve out of the beds. But about half are pathway to housing beds, and these are beds that people who are considered what we call priority 1 for housing, meaning they're the most vulnerable and longest term homeless folks in our community. They can stay at the navigation center or in a navigation center until we're able to place them in supportive housing. So there is not a time limit for people who are in a pathway to housing bed who we have prioritized because of their vulnerability and their risk for permanent supportive housing, and we will allow them to stay at the navigation center until we're able to make that placement. And then for other folks who do not have a direct pathway to housing, meaning they're not part of the most vulnerable cohort of people experiencing homelessness, we do have a general 60-day length of stay to ensure that we are able to offer a bed and a break from the street to somebody else experiencing homelessness. We try to make shelter reservations for all of those folks so that there is an option at the end of their stay for another place inside for them to go. But we also know that with 7,500 people experiencing homelessness on any given night, 355 navigation center beds and about 1,200 shelter beds, that we cannot meet the need of everybody on each night. And so that's why it's so important, as everyone here that spoke, to have the housing exits after navigation centers, right? These will be successful if we have places for people to go. And that is certainly part of the equation and part of our larger plan.
Could you tie that question back one more time to my first point? What is your idea about the 4 to 6 year limit? I mean, to create a navigation center requires effort, requires planning, requires kind of a sensitive setup. Why 6 years only? Why can't these particular facilities not be designed with some slightly more open-ended future? What
Yes,
are the reasons for that?
Because of the challenge with finding space to have a navigation center and challenges in siting and opening navigation centers and shelters throughout the community, we have employed a strategy of using interim sites, so sites that have another use down the road. This is us thinking out of the box and getting as creative as possible. Our first navigation center is at 1950 Mission Street, which is going to be developed into family affordable housing. Obviously, that is what we want for this site. So we took an opportunity to use it in the interim. So it's a temporary use of the site until the developer is able to begin. 1515 South Van Ness, similar use. This is a pre-development site. Civic Center Hotel, 3 of our existing 4 navigation centers are interim uses of existing sites that have other purposes, and we're trying to make the best of a bad situation in terms of the challenge of finding space. Now, we're also pursuing 2 new navigation centers on Caltrans property where we hope to have a longer duration, because I think, as you say, the cost of setting up a navigation center, as well as just the tremendous need, we know that the longer we can operate these, the better. But we are trying to work within the confines of the navigation center legislation, as well as the available sites.
The last point is pedestrian safety, walkability, a public realm that is not just basically a marginal temporary site, but something which indeed speaks to all of us needing safe passage. Is there any ability to get PUD, even Caltrans, or somebody involved, because it's in the interest of all, not to just send out ambulances there to pick up seriously injured people, but indeed provide something by which the navigation center becomes a positive interim step in order to deal with a larger issue as a positive action rather than as a temporary site, I'll park you there, done. And I'd like to kind of see that this commission not only supports, but really urges the Board of Supervisors in these types of marginal sites to make the proper investments that at least the minimum safety standards and the minimum kind of setting is provided by which these sites can really work.
Definitely. Julie, I don't know if this is something that Public Works can speak to in terms of the design of the site to enhance safety, as it's a little outside of the scope of us as the operator and funder of the site.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So what we do on every site is we actually increase the fire and life safety conditions of the site, particularly in this one, by adding sprinklers and having fire-rated walls. But in terms of also, we have outdoor activity areas for the clients so that they are enticed to stay, hang out, have activities. They also have a lot of support services. So the intent is that they don't go outside as much. They can go in and out, there's no curfew, but the intent is to make this kind of an outdoor living room. They have a community room. They have TV lounging areas, ping pong tables, things like that. So they don't really loiter around the outside. And they're staffed 24/7, I believe.
But I'm not talking about loitering. I'm talking about a safe passage. If somebody comes later from having gone to a store or met a friend somewhere, for them to return with reasonable ambient lighting on the sidewalks leading to it. That is what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I believe that you're doing everything on the site to meet those standards. That is definitely my expectation.
Yes, we have increased lighting around. We have overhead lighting over the outdoor area. There's a gate and there's cameras, and they can come in and out by buzzing to get in and out of the site, if that's what you're talking about.
No, I'm talking about streetscape improvements. That's what I'm talking about.
So we are increasing the lighting around the street on the sidewalks. If you look at the slide near the end, you can see what it will look like before and after. Are you talking about lighting? I guess I'm...
I think, if I may, Julie, I think that the question has to do with getting to the site. Are there sufficient sidewalks and lighting and everything to get to the site, a safe pedestrian passage to the site?
Yeah, and I think on one of the last slides that has the building painting, you can see how big the sidewalks are. There's sidewalks on both sides.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Richards.
Just two quick things. First, you mentioned the survey of people who are homeless. 70% are or still are San Francisco residents now who had a home but don't have a home. Have you gone any more granular in how they ended up being homeless?
Yes, so as part of our point in time count, which we do every other year, we ask questions about sort of causes of homelessness and challenges of getting out of homelessness, and for the most part, an inability to afford housing, either because of a loss of job, but mostly, eviction and because of a loss of job, but it is mostly that inability to pay the rent. The rent is too high that people identify as their primary cause of homelessness, that and actually family challenges.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I mean, when I saw this address on the agenda and actually opened up the packet, I kind of thought, I kind of agree with Laura Clark that, even if we added a few weeks to this, it's something that I don't think I could even disapprove. So to take the commission more out of an active approval route on something that's so basic, good public policy, something I could support.
If I could, I think I wondered the same thing. And because of the way the legislation was drafted, we streamlined the process a couple of years ago to make these happen. The only parts of the city where they are required to have a conditional use is in the PDR zones. Okay. They are as a right everywhere else. And I think part of the reason for that is just because of access and the very issues that are being raised about access and truck movements and all that kind of stuff. But everywhere else there are as of right.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you for saying that because, I think the first speaker has it right. We have to do better by our neighbors. And the people who are experiencing homelessness and going through these navigation centers are and were and will continue to be our neighbors. And our navigation centers are a great step and something that we should be proud of, but it's just a beginning step. I hope we get 35 navigation centers throughout the city, but it's part of a larger system, and we need step-up housing all along the way. And while we don't necessarily control the services that are provided to people experiencing homelessness, we do play a role in the conditions that allow for more navigation centers to be built and more step-up housing so that people can find their way home. So I'm really glad that we're engaged in this community discussion, and I want us to continue to just think about the role that we play in making sure that folks can take that next step from navigation centers forward.
Commissioner Moore.
I think I see the commission in complete agreement. I move to approve.
Second.
So I was just going to, if I may, so I work a block away from the temporary shelter on South Van Ness and 26th, and the discussion when that opened last year, particularly from the businesses surrounding it, was similar to the concerns that I heard from Ms. House. So I want to acknowledge that, we heard those concerns. So I work for a nonprofit business, a block away, and I can tell you that things are 100% better since that facility was open, with all of the issues that you listed, the garbage, public urination, defecation, things are cleaner, they're better, even the parking issues are better. So I think that it would be great if at some point the department could have some, quantifiable data to share with the public about these things, because, I've seen that, and it would be a great reassurance to the businesses surrounding these navigation centers to have some, quantifiable data to point to. So thank you.
There's nothing further, Commissioners. There's a motion that has been seconded to approve this matter with conditions. On that motion, Commissioner Fong? Aye. Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye. Commissioner
Richards?
Aye.
And Commission Chair Melgar?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 6-0. Commissioners, it'll place us on items 7, 8A, B, C, D, and E. For case numbers 2011.1356E, M, T, Z, and U for the Central Soma Plan certification of the final environmental impact report, CEQA findings, general plan amendments, planning code and administrative code amendments, zoning map amendments, and implementation program, respectively, for Central Soma. I will advise those members of the public that due to a noticing error, the action items for 8A through E cannot be considered today. And my understanding is that there will be a request from staff to continue these items, including the certification of the final environmental impact report, to May 10th. However, the Planning Commission will accept public testimony on this matter as a general topic of conversation.
Thank you. Steve Wertheim, Planning Department staff. I'm going to give quite a brief presentation today. Obviously, we're very disappointed not to be able to hold the adoption hearing today. We'd noticed for March 29th and the initiation hearing on March 1st, because a couple of you were not going to be here March 29th, we all kind of agreed to do the hearing on April 12th. We didn't notice a continuation on March 29th. Pretty basic stuff, and we apologize for the inconvenience that this has caused. So here's a quick update on where things are. On Tuesday, Mayor Farrell and Supervisor Kim introduced the substitute ordinances for the planning code and the zoning map. These incorporate the changes that you asked for to bring the total units foreseeable up to 8,300 units, thus maximizing the housing analyzed on the environmental impact report. These also include minor and technical corrections that were all identified in your packet from last week as quote-unquote expected changes and in the zoning map issues for your consideration. Also on Tuesday, Supervisor Peskin introduced an urging resolution to facilitate the land swap that would trade the 1.5-acre PUC-owned parcel at 639 Bryant Street between 4th and 5th for the 8-acre 2000 Marin site owned by Tishman Spire and located most visibly at the intersection of Cesar Chavez and Evans Streets. The swap is critical to Central Soma for two reasons. First, it would facilitate the creation of our 1-acre Central Soma Park on the block bounded by 4th, 5th, Bryant, and Brannan, which would be developed concurrently as Tishman Spire's development proposed on on that site. Second would put under city ownership the preferred site of the temporary flower mart, which with the site, the piers being relegated to being the backup site. So that's happened since the last we met. Moving forward, we're going to use this additional month to vet the bevy of input we received right before the packet was submitted on April 5th, as well as any other issues that continue to surface, so we can have an even more complete packet for you at that time. Additionally, we had 2 items calendared for April 26th as quote-unquote trailing legislation that will now be considered May 10th. We had planning code language related to the Community Facilities District, and also the ordinance proposed in Housing Sustainability District in Central Soma. That being said, we'll probably still have an informational on April 26th related to the Housing Sustainability District to give you an overview and really get to focus in on that proposal. That concludes my presentation. I would ask that you continue the certification of the EIR until May 10th, and then all the other items are informational until then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wertheimer. With that, we will take some public comment. I have several speaker cards. Oh. Mr. Rizzo. Oh.
Well, you could just call his name first. Please.
I don't think I have a speaker card for him. Mr. Grisso, Mike Grisso, Eileen Tillman, Steve Oku, Scott Feeney.
Thanks.
Laura Clark, Laura Winsler, and then anyone else who wants to speak, please line up. Hi.
Good afternoon. Vice President Melgar, Commissioners, Director Ram. My name is Mike Grisso, Senior Vice President with Kilroy Realty. Although you're not voting today, I would like to provide you with a quick update on the Flower Mart project. I am pleased to report that, responding to requests from both Mayor Farrell and Supervisor Peskin, Kilroy has committed to designating the preferred site for the temporary flower market during construction as 2000 Marin Street in the Bayview, the site that some of our vendors and customers prefer. You may recall that Kilroy has always been open to using 2000 Marin as the temporary site, subject to its availability. 2000 Marin is currently owned by Tishman Speyer, which has not been willing to enter into a lease with Kilroy for the site. However, as you heard from Mr. Wertheim this week, Supervisor Peskin and Supervisor Kim introduced a resolution urging the city of San Francisco to swap one of its parcels of land in Central Soma for the 2000 Marin site on an expedited schedule. So if this swap is executed before the end of this year, then 2000 Marin will become available, and both Supervisor Peskin and Mayor Farrell have pledged to ensure that Kilroy can then lease 2000 Marin for the temporary flower market. Before this swap can happen, however, Tishman Speyer is requiring that it receive entitlements for its proposed Central Soma project at 598 Brannan Street. Obviously, until this body approves 598 Brannan, none of us can guarantee that the project will be approved by any date certain or that it'll even get approved at all. Therefore, as you heard from Mr. Wertheim, we need to keep a backup site in case 2000 Marin is not available within the time frame in which it is needed. Kilroy committed to providing a temporary site located within San Francisco that can accommodate all of the existing vendors during construction. Piers 19, 19 and a half, and 23 is the only site that is available today that meets those requirements. So again, I'm pleased to report that Mayor Farrell and Supervisor Peskin have agreed that the piers can remain available as a backup site in the event that 2000 Marin does not become available. So Kilroy will pursue both options, with 2000 Marin as the preferred option. And should Tishman Speyer wish to speed up this process by making 2000 Marin immediately available, I will happily go out in the hallway and negotiate a lease with Carl Shannon right now. I don't think Carl's here today, but Commissioners, there are still some key details that need to be ironed out, obviously, but we believe this compromise serves everyone involved. We've shared this news with the flower vendors at our regular monthly tenant meeting this past Monday, received some very overwhelmingly positive feedback about this approach. I want to thank Mayor Farrell, Supervisor Peskin, Supervisor Kim, the staff at OEWD for their work on this issue. And I want to thank the Commission and the Planning Department staff, again, for all their work on the Central Soma plan. We are excited to see it move forward on May 10th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Grisso. That's good news. If the folks that are standing in front of the door could please take a seat or stand on the other side, that would be great. Next speaker, please.
Yeah, the intent is if you're queuing to speak, you can line up on the screen side.
Members of the commission, my name is Steve Oku, and I'm a third-generation flower grower. My grandfather started growing flowers in Mountain View 116 years ago. He came to this great country of opportunity, a poor man, and after working in the fields for about 10 years, saved enough to buy 1 acre of land in Mountain View for $100. And from there, he planted the seeds of our family business. A few years ago, while I was president of the San Francisco Flower Market, the city came to us and said, "You guys have to move." This was a complete shock because we loved our location. We've been there a long time. And when we started looking around other possible sites, and the city said, "You have to move to someplace in San Francisco where real estate prices are very high," it looked like, it was doomsday for the flower market because a lot of our older families who are shareholders, they're old, they want to get some money out of the deal, and to buy really expensive property and then have to build a flower market means they're going to nix the deal and say, "You guys just shut it down." So what happened was we suggested, why can't we build a flower market on the present site? Why can't we convince a developer to say, let us stay here? And luckily Kilroy came in at like a white knight, and the city loved the idea of keeping the flower market on site. You've never been called a white knight before? But anyway, I just want to urge that the vision that we as a board has to keep our location does not get derailed because something happens in the south of the market plan, or the central SOMA plan, I guess it's called, gets disapproved or delayed, or, we need that site. The city and Kilroy basically came to us and said, "Here's another location," and they showed us 2000 Marin. We love that site as a relocation site. We've been banking on it. And then with difficulties, they started showing us the piers. And just from trying to do the process of finding a location, I know how difficult it was. So in a way, I couldn't fault Kilroy for saying, here's the site on the piers if something doesn't happen. But, really, we're afraid of losing our customers if it's hard to get to the Embarcadero. And if we lose them and they start going someplace else, we've lost the flower market. Even when we come back to our location, if they've got other places or they're going online to buy flowers and it's coming directly from Bogota, Colombia, or whatever, we're done. So do whatever you can to get us the Marin site. It's a beautiful location. It's easy to get to. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Commissioners, my name is Eileen Tillman, and I'm a almost 50-year resident of Central Soma. And in the last year, I've been engaged in community planning process for the proposed Central Soma Park. I'm excited by the opportunity for it to bring more green space and activity to our neighborhood, and I look forward to working with the design team and the city to make sure that it's well taken care of and managed, and that it stays a clean, safe, and inviting space. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tillman. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Commissioners. Scott Feeney. I am a volunteer with YIMBY Action, and so I wanted to first commend the Planning Department for amending the Central Soma plan to try to get more housing in there as much as possible without doing a new EIR. That said, even with the revisions, we still have a plan that's going to introduce, I think the latest estimate is 35,000 jobs and 8,300 new homes. So that's about a 4-to-1 ratio, which is still like where are the other 20,000 workers going to live? I know there's a lot of good things in this plan that people are looking forward to, like the park, and as a bicyclist, I'm looking forward to better bike lanes. So I know that there's a lot of people that don't want this plan to get completely thrown away and started over to do a new EIR. However, what I would like to see is some seriousness to housing the workers that are being added by this plan. If we're going to be adding a lot of jobs, we have to be adding a lot of housing, and there's really nothing going on citywide that's producing enough housing to make up for this deficit right now. So one thing that would be not enough but beneficial is definitely the Housing Sustainability District that's been talked about, so we can make sure at least the housing in Central Soma gets built faster. I would hope that the delay would have the silver lining of allowing that to be approved at the same time as the plan. But also, like, I would echo what the president of the Board of Supervisors, London Breed, said in a memo recently, that one of the things that planning should do is immediately start undertaking environmental analysis of adding more housing in and around Central Soma as a follow-up to this plan. And in addition, finding ways to increase housing citywide and ideally putting a lot of the new housing in places that are less susceptible to gentrification. One thing that I was a little concerned about in the recent memo from the planning department was one of the suggestions for how are we going to accommodate the housing is I think the neighborhoods that were suggested for potentially having that housing were the Excelsior, the Bayview, and Mission south of Cesar Chavez. And I'm not against housing in those neighborhoods, but it seems problematic to me to pick that specific set of neighborhoods, because where is the equity? Where are the wealthier areas that are also close to transit or even have better transit, like Glen Park? Why don't we consider housing there? Why not Inner Sunset? Why not along Geary? Why not West Portal? So anyway, I guess my ask is to make sure the Housing Sustainability District gets passed and immediately start looking at adding more housing in Soma and also in neighborhoods in the city that are not susceptible to gentrification, to add those missing 20,000 homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Andrew, and I'm speaking on behalf of the We Are Soma Coalition. For housing under the Central Soma Plan, the Coalition demands that the city purchase existing affordable housing and land bank future affordable housing sites, that the plan achieve 50% affordable housing for all new housing development, that the plan maximize resident neighborhood housing preference for new affordable housing units to the highest extent possible, that the plan expand AMI requirements for new affordable housing to include lower income and middle income people, that the plan support the Council of Community Housing Organizations, or CHUCHU's, position on the jobs housing balance as presented by CHUCHU to the Commission on March 1st that takes into account the needs of low to moderate income earners. And lastly, that the city aggressively engage in site acquisition and land dedication before the plan is passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is David Wu, and I'm with the South Market Community Action Network. We are very concerned that the public still needs more time for input and conversation on this plan that will impact not just the South Market, but the entire city of San Francisco. On March 28th, the response to comments to the Central Soma Plan EIR was released, with the adoption hearing scheduled for just 2 weeks later on April 12th. Even though numerous hearings have been held on this plan, the plan cannot and should not be rushed because of the serious impact it will have on the South Market and the rest of San Francisco. The plan is nowhere near where it needs to be for it to take into account and seriously address gentrification and displacement that will come with the plan. The gentrification and displacement that will occur will not just be in the South Market, but across the entire city. The planning department itself admits that the plan will have a citywide impact. The planning department has repeatedly said that the housing needs produced by the plan will be met by new development across the rest of the city, citing developments such as Treasure Island and Park Merced. However, these developments are just proposed, so they are not yet built. This plan simply lacks a detailed strategy of addressing displacement impacts on existing residents both in the South Market and the rest of the city. Further, the planning department and the city are already operating as though the plan has been passed and certified when no vote has yet been taken. Planning department public hearing notices are already including the Central Soma Plan as an existing area plan that new developments are subject to, while the reality is that the plan has not even been passed, as you can see in the overhead. This is extremely problematic and further shows how the city and the planning department are promoting a predefined plan that was and is created for private development interests at the expense of the existing community in the South Market. There seems to be more interest in getting the plan approved as soon as possible to satisfy development needs rather than take the time to seriously address the gentrification and displacement aspects of the plan in a neighborhood and citywide context. In order to minimize displacement now, SOMCAN demands the following actions be taken before the plan is passed, including aggressive acquisition of rent-controlled buildings, aggressive site acquisition for new 100% affordable housing, instituting a right of first refusal for residential and commercial renters, and instituting a moratorium on the sale of existing rent-controlled buildings, the sale of public land for private or for-profit development, and on new market rate housing construction for projects not included in the existing plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is... Oh, here we go. Hi. My name is Brooke Ray Rivera. I'm the executive director of Place Lab. We're a nonprofit here in San Francisco that empowers communities to create and sustain great public spaces. We've been working for the past 6 months on the community engagement component of the new Central Soma Park, and I'm pleased to report that we have amassed a pretty strong and diverse breadth of interest and support in the park over the course of, we've held 3 major community workshops, 2 youth-focused workshops for Central Soma youth, and held over 27 one-on-one or small group stakeholder meetings with constituents in and around the Central Soma neighborhood. We've heard that this park is an important and critical opportunity to bring more green space to the neighborhood, as well as community gathering and cultural celebration space. So we're actively working with all of these different stakeholders on an ongoing basis. We have some more community meetings ahead. So just want to brief you on that. I'd like to commend the planning department for their hard work on this plan throughout the many years. And we hope that the plan's public benefit funding includes adequate ongoing funding for operations and programming of this new park to make sure that it succeeds as a clean, safe, and welcoming community space for the long term. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Amisha Doles. I'm a florist here in San Francisco. To bring it back to the flower market really quickly, I had a whole thing to say, but it's already kind of been said. I'm excited about the 2000 Marin site. I'm here to support that, along with a coalition of florists that are ready to make that move and think that it's the only move that will save the flower market, that supports so many businesses, small businesses, and hundreds of employees. Such an important part of San Francisco. So thank you guys for protecting us and keeping us flowing and going in the city for the next 100 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I'm going to continue those good thoughts. My name is Laurel Winslow. I'm a floral designer. I've spoken in front of you several times on the issue of the temporary site for the flower market. After the last meeting on the 29th, I sent you 2 items of documentary evidence concerning the feelings of the vendors and industry players about the pier location and its unsuitability for the flower market during the interim while the new market is constructed. It is heartening to hear that 2000 Marin is a clear possibility at this point, and all I want to say is that whatever can be done by this body to make that come to pass would be much appreciated by our floral community, all the vendors, all the florists, and all our customers who rely on us for beautiful flowers. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please, Ms. Gomez.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. There, good to see the timers working. So 2 points that I wanted to make on behalf of Local 2 and also on behalf of the We Are Soma Coalition, of which Local 2 has formed a part since its inception. From We Are Soma, you've heard some of the pieces about some of what We Are Soma is asking for in terms of mitigation of impacts of the plan. In particular, what I wanted to flag for all of you is that the coalition has been spending a lot of time thinking through proposals and a plan for how to spend and allocate the community benefits money that is proposed to come as part of the plan, and we'll be sending a finalized version of that shortly. And also wants to ask that the planning staff staff and department work closely with the city attorney, and there's a really strong concern that the money gets spent on community services and that those go to benefit the people of Soma. As far as Local 2, I heard conversation the last time that this plan was discussed about something such as a policy statement or something else that would sort of guide a lot of the criteria with regard especially to large commercial projects. So I'll briefly read what we're proposing be added or amended to the plan as it exists now. So for all residential development greater than 25 units and all commercial development, which would include hotels, greater than 50,000 square feet, require the developer to provide a community good jobs employment plan for public review and comment prior to consideration of project approval by the planning department that would detail the goals for all the permanent jobs within that proposed development for hiring disadvantaged community members, especially South of Market and Central City residents, at good living wages with benefits and workers' rights. And the plan should detail how those goals will be addressed by the future project's employers through engagement with concerned community, civic, and labor organizations. So that's what we're proposing and submitting for your comment and also for inclusion in the plan. Again, this is a fairly major plan. There are probably literally billions of dollars worth of additional value being created by the plan, and we really want to make sure that when that is being proposed, that it goes towards jobs that are good, family-sustaining jobs that will allow people to remain in this community with dignity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Commissioners, Andrew Junius with Rubin, Junius & Rose. A pleasure to be before you today, and I'm glad we're getting close to the finish line. I'm here on behalf of Tishman Speyer and specifically Tishman Speyer's Creamery project at 4th and Townsend. That's, I think, the largest residential project that's going to be proposed for Central Soma. 900 market rate units, 270 off-site affordable units. But I'm here actually to talk about a kind of technical issue, as some of my other associates are from the firm. I want to call your attention to the Transportation Demand Management Program that you guys enacted last year. TDM, and specifically the grandfathering provision that was in that piece of legislation that we have on the books right now. It was adopted last year with a decent grandfathering provision that took care of the projects that were in the pipeline. Unfortunately, the legislation you have before you takes that grandfathering out, and we're not sure why. It's really critical that that grandfather stay in for large projects like the Creamery. You know, it's really tough. It's a new program. We really haven't seen it applied to virtually any project, much less a really large project. And frankly, it doesn't scale well at a large project. We've had these conversations with the staff, as the director knows. But let me back up a little bit again. It's new. It went through the process. We were at the table. The developers were at the table talking about this, which is why the grandfather is in there in the first place. You know, the idea started back in 2015. 2016, you had several hearings. Early 2017, the board adopted it, and now we are with it. But again, the developers are at the table. The grandfather is not perfect, but it does work for the large projects that have been in the pipeline for quite some time. And the staff has already kind of acknowledged this. When Corey Teague sent a letter to the Land Use Committee back right before the adoption of the ordinance, it was clear that there was a simple fairness issue, like all grandfathering provisions raise. You know, you can't pull the rug out from under big developers or big projects that are long in the entitlement process, lots of commitments, lots of decisions made, and then you can't change the rules. But of course, at the same time that the TDM was rolling in track 1, Central Soma was rolling in track 2. And we're not quite sure why the two tracks weren't talking together. Because, you know, frankly, at the same time when Corey wrote the letter and basically talked about the big projects that were going to have problems with this and why the grandfather was needed, many of those big projects are in Central Soma. So we're not sure how this happened. I think it might be just an oversight. We're very sure that this is an important piece of this. It's a simple fix. We're looking for the commission to, you know, consider this and hopefully direct the staff to reinstitute the grandfather that's basically already in the code. In other words, don't pull it out. Let Central Soma large projects be treated like every other large project in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. Melinda Sarjapour, Rubin, Junius & Rose. Our firm represents a number of key sites in the Central Soma area, so you'll be hearing from us on a couple of discrete issues. We are strongly supportive of Central Soma moving forward and appreciate the staff's efforts in preparing this extremely detailed zoning package that is before you and will be considered over the coming weeks. However, one area that needs attention is usable open space for residential towers in the area. The plan is applying traditional Eastern neighborhoods requirements to Central Soma, which are 80 square feet per dwelling unit if private, or 54 square feet if publicly accessible. This requirement works in the Eastern neighborhoods, which typically contain lower-rise development on larger parcels that gives you more space to accommodate them. However, Central Soma is going to have some towers of up to 400 feet, and at that scale, with many hundreds of units, the high Eastern neighborhoods requirements simply don't work. The city's downtown zoning, which is tailored to tower developments, the C3 districts, has an open space requirements that's 36 square feet per unit or 48 if common. That's achievable for towers, and the same standard should apply in Central Soma. So the high area requirement here is even harder to achieve due to the plan's proposal to impose an in-lieu fee of $890 per each square foot that can't be provided on a site. So that's about double the fee that applies in other Eastern neighborhood districts. To illustrate the issue, a 900-unit project in Central Soma would have a 72,000 square foot requirement for private open space, which is a very large figure. With a high-end lieu fee, exception from even 15% of that requirement would end up triggering a $9.5 million fee, so very high. This wasn't a form of impact fee that was intended to generate revenue under the plan, came as a surprise to developers under the package, and it wasn't in the financial analysis. This is an important issue given the desire to maximize housing in Central Soma. Unless it's corrected, the combination of high area requirements and in-lieu fees could make it infeasible for key sites to provide the residential towers that we're counting on. So this would impact projects like the Creamery, which is currently anticipated to contribute up to 1,200 units of housing in the planned area and nearly 30% BMRs. To help residential development move forward, we're asking the Commission and the Department to amend the residential open space requirements for Central Soma Tower development so that they're consistent with C3 standards and allow developers to meet some portion of that by providing POPOS. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tara Sullivan from Rubin, Junius and Rose. First, I do want to thank Steve and staff publicly for all the effort that they've put into this plan. He's been very open with our firm and with us over the past couple of years, have taken many phone calls on the minutia of the code, and so we want to thank him. We've gone through the proposed code that was introduced on March 1st, line by line, all the code changes, and in your packet, Exhibit 3.6, as well as letters from our firm, have some itemized details of code-specific issues that we would hope that you will take a look at over the next few weeks. I just want to raise two issues specifically. The first one is regarding tower separation in Section 132.4, and this is on pages 23 and 24 of the code legislation, if you have it in front of you. The tower separation controls establish the minimum distance that towers can be from one another. For projects in the Central Soma SUD, they have to have a separation of 115 feet from one another. If a project's unable to meet these distances, they can seek an exemption through a large project authorization from the Planning Commission. However, for projects in the Central Soma SUD, the Commission can only grant this tower separation if there are 4 explicit criteria that are met, and the code is very specific that all 4 have to be met. These are very difficult for the large key development sites to meet. If you recall, there are 8 development sites, key development sites in the plan, and these are large assemblages which are proposed to have multiple buildings on them. Because the buildings are clustered together, they can't meet this 115 minimum tower separation requirement. Most are going to have to ask for an exception. However, the exceptions themselves are very strict. You have to have a minimum of 85 feet from another tower. A floor area of a tower can't exceed 10,000 square feet. There must be a difference of 50 feet in height between the towers, and that's including those that are on the same site. So most of the key development sites will not be able to meet this, and they will not be able to get the exception. So we ask that there is an exception or language be added to Section 329E that would allow the 8 development sites to seek exemption under that section. And the second issue I want to raise is related to 329. These specifically related to the key development site exceptions, and this is on page 85 to 89 of your packets. Section 329 generally, for every other site in Eastern Neighborhoods, as well as the rest of the Central Soma SUD, has a list of 12 exceptions that any project can ask the commission for. However, key development sites has its separate section E, and there are 8 exceptions that can be sought. The way it is drafted, only those 8 exceptions apply to the large sites. So for example, open space, exposure, rear yard, all of those are in the 1 through 11 and are not enumerated or allowed to be sought by the key development sites. So we think maybe a simple clause, I don't know if this was an oversight, but maybe just a very simple draft clause in addition to the exceptions 1 through 11, 1 through 12, above the following 8 are available to the key development sites. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Chloe Angeles, also from Reuben Junius and Rose. I think I'm last. Here today on behalf of Kilroy regarding the Flower Mart project. Thank you for taking the time to hear all our comments today. I first also want to say that we're strongly supportive of the plan overall and really appreciate the tremendous staff effort to put forth this really very detailed plan. I first want to echo the points made by Andrew Junius about TDM grandfathering. It's crucial that the grandfathering provision be maintained for the key sites. The program doesn't scale well for these large projects. Second, I'd encourage staff and the commission to take another look at maximum parking provisions for wholesale and distribution uses. If the plan is going to encourage PDR uses, particularly large-scale wholesale uses like the flower market, we need to ensure that the plan provides adequate parking to serve those kinds of uses, and as currently written, it doesn't. I also want to address the key sites exceptions that Tara mentioned. The plan identifies 8 key sites with the stated intent of providing greater flexibility for those sites. But the new code language only allows the key sites to ask for a limited number of specifically listed exceptions. This means that the biggest projects cannot pursue the PUD exceptions normally available to Eastern Neighborhoods projects through the LPA process. Without the LPA and PUD exceptions, the only way for the key sites to obtain flexibility is through a variance, which is hard to obtain for new construction, or by amending the code on a project-by-project basis. The Central Soma plan encourages a novel mix of uses, requiring or encouraging a mix of PDR, office, retail, and residential, while striving for a dense, walkable, and transit-oriented neighborhood. To achieve these goals, staff has proposed detailed design and use regulations. Central Soma needs the same flexibility, Central Soma projects need the same flexibility to ask for minor exceptions from other development standards, including the PUD type exceptions that all other LPA projects in the Eastern Neighborhoods are eligible for. Providing for these exceptions will facilitate the achievement of designs that are high quality, functional for tenants, and marketable. It is crucial that the Commission be given greater discretion to modify standards as it considers the unique needs of large sites with complicated mixes of users, like the Flower Mart project. That said, we ask that Section 329D be amended to allow the Planning Commission to retain its discretion to grant PUD-type exceptions to Central Soma projects, including for the key sites. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Todd David, I am not with Reuben Junius and Rose, but always looking for a job. So just wanted to talk really broadly about Central Soma. And I think this isn't just Central, what I'm about to say is not just about Central Soma. It's just a reminder, because we think about this a lot and we talk about it a lot, right? The basket of costs that's going into building things in Central Soma. And so, we have, as we've said before, right, the raw material cost of construction, labor cost, financing cost. We have impact, large impact fees, and they're great because they're going to give a lot of community benefits. And we have, a fairly high inclusionary fee. So those are all, the baskets. It's just something that we need to think about. The other thing that, I think we're going to unfortunately see in Central Soma is we're going to see some abuses, CEQA lawsuits, abuses. That we know that there are already residents in buildings that are complaining about views and things like that. And so it's just one of those things that, once again, this is a process that I believe is 8 years in the making. And, when I don't know when we're going to have first shovel in the ground, but all of these things, it would be great if we could figure out ways to move these forward in a little bit of a quicker fashion and maybe discourage some of the abuses that perhaps an 8-year process should be able to have dealt with along during the 8 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, Laura Clark here for another informational hearing. Whew. I just want to say once again, this plan is signing us up for a lot of jobs growth. And it doesn't seem that we have any plans in the pipeline for corresponding housing growth. The planning department does not have any plans, area plans, in the pipeline, and that is not a failure of the planning department. That is a failure of the planning commission to not direct them to prioritize this. Additionally, the neighborhoods that were put up by the planning department as potential neighborhoods are not equitable. They're talking about just doing more development in the Bayview, doing more development and talking about the Excelsior. Where is the West Side in this conversation? Where is Glen Park in this conversation? Where is, frankly, St. Francis Wood? The market is indicating to us that we should be putting housing there because their property values are very high. We should listen to that. Wherever there are high property values and good transit, we should be upzoning. And there is no reason not to be doing that. We cannot just keep asking low-income communities and the former industrial zones, where obviously there are toxic waste problems, to be taking on all of the density that this city needs to do. We need to be doing more on the west side. We need to upzone Noe Valley. I lived there. Many more apartments could be going in there, and I wouldn't have had to leave. We cannot just be pointing the finger at the South Bay, which has historically been just like us in adding a lot more jobs and not corresponding housing. We cannot just be complicit in this encouraging of jobs growth without housing. Again, Minneapolis, they're considering fourplexes citywide. We already basically zone for 4 floors everywhere in the city. Why not have a unit per floor? There is no reason not to. I understand that this plan is moving forward quickly. There are things we can do to mitigate it, to make the housing be built faster. But additionally, we should all be worried about the blue condo owners. It seems to be one guy who has the penthouse who doesn't want to lose his view, who is going to be doing a CEQA lawsuit of some kind. We need to be thinking about how even the housing that is accounted for in this plan is at risk. Thanks.
Mr. Alberling.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Alberling, Taco Group. First, I want to emphasize the importance of the We Are Soma Coalition's position on employment programs. The assumption of this plan, Central Soma plan, is that the city job programs are good enough. They're not. They are really not. They're strong on construction, but when it comes to the permanent jobs, they really do not get much results. And especially here, where you are intending this to be a technology industry district with all the office buildings, the permanent jobs are in the tech industry are crucial to have a really effective job program for city residents and community residents. The Twitter tax break programs at Central Market were a miserable failure. Just admit it. We have to do better this time. Second, I want to make sure you're aware of the great importance to We Are Soma and the community advocates that we have a broad-based, wide-ranging purview Citizens Advisory Committee for the South of Market, including the Central Soma, but all the eastern neighborhoods south of Market, that will essentially replace the very inadequate eastern neighborhood CAC with regard to Soma. This is a top priority for us. It's not in the package of measures that you continue today. It will be a separate administrative code amendment. The department has not proposed anything to the community, nothing, no specifics, and it's languishing. But believe me, for us, this is equal importance with everything else you're doing, because we know very well that promises are one thing when you all vote for a plan, but 5 years, 10 years down the road, when things actually get done, money actually gets spent, developers actually have to do what they suggested years ago they were going to do. If the community is not watching and is not empowered with a genuine advisory process, it fails. It turns out to be BS. Now, as you might expect, not seeing that the department is not moving ahead with this, we are now working with Supervisor Kim's staff to draft that administrative code language. We are going to obviously review it with our community first. We would be glad to talk with the department staff about it as well, if they're willing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment on this item? Okay, with that, public comment is closed. Commissioners? Commissioner Richards.
So I thought, well, what a waste of my afternoon sitting here through another Central Soma presentation. I think it's my 10th. But actually, I got some information here, and I do have some questions, so maybe this was actually a good waste of my time. Mr. Wertheim, the missing millions, the $80 million that we talked about last time that was yet unassigned, have we come up with some recommendations on where they go?
Yes, we assigned it out last time I presented to you exactly how the $70 million would be spent, right? So if memory serves me, there was $25 million towards social and cultural programming within the 25 years, basically to keep funding Soma stabilization in perpetuity, because that's about to run out. We had $15 million towards cultural facilities. That's intended to be to fill a gap if Yerba Buena Center can't figure out in the next 10 years how to fill their capital planning gap, and if not, it can go towards another capital facility. Okay, we're $40 million in. We have, on the other end, we have $250,000 a year, or about $6 million towards Betsy Carmichael to provide mental health services and year-long programming for that school, because as I stated, about 20% of the kids are from homeless families, and 100% are receiving free or subsidized lunches. So that was what we worked with the school district to fill that gap. There's about $9 million towards neighborhood cleaning services. That was about maybe $300,000 or $400,000 a year. That was a request of Supervisor Kim to help keep the neighborhood clean. And then there would be $15 million, so $600,000 a year towards maintenance and upkeep of the parks and recreation and the new greenery that we provide. So that's the full menu.
Great. So a question on the sequencing of projects given the Prop M allocation. Do we have a sequencing of projects that are logical and that would meet the allocations that keep coming up in October, or I guess the free square footage?
I can't believe 15 hearings in, this is the first time that's come up, but yes, congratulations.
Okay.
we will have that for you.
Okay, okay, great. I don't need to know. I just wanted to make sure, because I heard the ballot initiative died when Ed Lee died, and I was like, oh my God, we got a Prop M ceiling we need to manage through. This TDM issue, was it an oversight or is it real?
Maybe some other answer to those two questions. So, hey, Josh is there. Do you want to answer this?
The reason why I ask is when Mr. Junius said, I think this is an oversight, I think Mr. Schwitzky kind of went like this. Yeah. That's why I'm asking.
Sure. Good afternoon, Josh Schwitzky with planning staff. So this TDM grandfathering issue falls into the question of grandfathering generally, and the plan has taken a general approach that projects that are not allowable under the existing zoning, regardless of when they were filed, should meet the current standards as of or in effect when the plan is adopted, at which time these projects can be approved under the zoning at that time, and that despite the fact that some of these projects submitted applications some time ago in anticipation of the Central Soma plan coming in, they weren't allowable at the time, so they shouldn't be able to avail themselves of the rules that were in effect at the time.
Oh, okay, so no cherry picking.
Precisely. So
we don't want, we want the zoning that it's going to give us, we don't want the requirements that, okay, I get what you're saying.
So that's the general approach, and that would apply not just to TDM, but universally across the board.
So this tower separation issue, is there anywhere, is there anywhere in the city where below 85 feet is allowed?
Yeah, I don't think there is a tower separation limit in the C3, for example.
Okay.
So there are various rules in the city. There's obviously a limited number of places where we have tower separation rules. In the C3, the tower separation rules apply just within your own property, and there are setback requirements above a certain height of the street wall, generally about 100 feet, and they start at 15 feet from your property line, and then it increases as the building gets taller.
Is that because of mostly commercial office space?
Yeah, those requirements were set in the 80s during the downtown plan when the area was primarily commercial. And so as we did the subsequent plans where there was much more residential, like Rincon Hill and Transbay, after lots of study about what makes for a livable residential neighborhood and looking at other cities for examples, we settled on 115 feet, and that's the standard in Rincon Hill, and in Transbay it's actually greater than that.
Is anywhere in those new areas, Rincon Hill plan, et cetera, where it falls below 85 feet where it's allowed?
Below 85 feet? No, not below 85 feet.
So 85 feet is the definite minimum,
definitely.
but you can go from 115 down to 85 with certain special approval.
Correct, yes.
That meets certain criteria.
Right.
What about the open space issue that was brought up by the Rubin and Junius folks, the 80-some feet versus the 30-some feet in other?
Yeah, so they are correct that in downtown, in the C3, the open space requirement is 36 square feet per unit. But if I could pivot again to, say, the Rincon Hill plan, the open space requirement there, where there are very large towers, as you know, on small properties, the requirement is 75 square feet per unit, which is very similar to this one, which is 80. So it's 5 square feet less. And in those, and all the projects in Rincon Hill under the plan that came in after the plan was adopted met that 75 square feet per unit requirement. There are creative ways to meet that. It's not all in the form of balconies or even roof decks. They are allowed to do off-site improvements, and some of the streetscape improvements in Rincon Hill were in satisfaction of the open space requirements. So there were a lot of options provided.
Okay. So we also heard from some of the We Are Soma community around some additional things. Some I don't know whether they'd go through the city attorney's sausage factory to come out sausage or not, because they sounded like they might not be actually legal. But we sat here last time and said, hey, go engage the community kind of one last time. So can you tell me what happened there, what the results of that one last time around the track was?
I reached out to the community after putting the packet together, because kind of that was where my mind was for the first couple of weeks after the last hearing, and reached out to them and to the person who's directing, and she directed me to a couple other people. One was Ms. Gomez from Local 2, who you've heard the request specific to labor there. I have not received another request as to how the dollars would be apportioned, and it sounds like we have a couple more weeks to talk about
issue with
that.
the jobs and the,
But yeah, there's the jobs piece, which you have some language, and also we put a policy into the plan specific to supporting good jobs at your request.
And it's in there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The CAC, as a child of the Market Octavia plan, we actually said, hey, you're not going to hoist this plan on us, even though we kind of helped write it, because after 5 or 10 years, we're all going to be gone. We want a CAC to make sure that the implementation on what actually we were supposed to get, we actually get, and we have some say in it. So I do support a CAC for the Central Soma plan. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we brought this idea to you as something we would like to see happen. We said, hey, it makes sense to split the Soma 3 districts. They're already in eastern neighborhoods, right? So you're already in a CAC. You would split the 3 districts and have them split. We offered the idea to Supervisor Kim's office. They said it was a good idea. They started working with the city attorney's office. One of their staff took a temporary leave of absence, and I haven't gotten much of an update since. Obviously, we're very excited to work. If it's already happening, that's great. We would love to participate in the crafting of this language. Just with 1,000 other moving pieces, it felt like that was clearly something that could be handled separately. If it can't be handled separately, we can try to do it together.
Okay. If I could on that issue, just to clarify, Steve, that right now Central Soma is part of all of Soma.
Right.
It's part of the Eastern Neighborhood CAC. The idea is to have a CAC for south of Market that is separate from the Mission District and Dogpatch in those neighborhoods, which seems like a logical separation to us.
Yes, we took this idea, even brought to the Eastern Neighborhood CAC and said, what do you think? And the members from all over the CAC, so that was a good idea, because it would just increase their participation and increase the relevance. If you ask someone in Soma about open space and Dogpatch, it's just not as visceral. So there was a lot of support in that body as well to split and create 2 different bodies.
Let's see. Sorry. just a lot going on. I think that's it. Thanks. I think folks in the community, if there are things that you want us to consider beyond the already declared policy, things that you've indicated that were important to you, get them to us so that we could, in the next round of this, actually talk about what they are. Make sure if they're questionable on the line of legality that you make sure that they're legal before we actually even waste our time talking about them if they're clearly not legal. But I'm open to them. The other thing, one last closing, because we're kind of here near the end. The folks from Rubin and Junius, you had me on a lot of the saying, hey, Eastern Neighborhoods does it this way, but we have to do it that way. But I think it was the last point you flipped it. So it was like the cherries went on the wheel in my head, and it said you're cherry picking. So you didn't want parts of the Eastern Neighborhood Plan that didn't benefit you, but you wanted the parts that did. So I'm just a little bit confused, Mr. Junius. I think it was the last point where you said we want the Eastern Neighborhoods version of this. Somebody said it. So it looks like the staff has kind of made a lot of decisions on these. But I'm open to more conversations with you folks and with the staff.
If you don't mind, you have a memo. We got a lot of information really right at the end. It was too much to consider the policy outcomes of those. So I basically made a document called Issues for Consideration in your case report, such that we can make sure that they're vetted, with the presumption that today would be the adoption hearing. We didn't want them to be not considered. Now, this extra time, one of my goals is to go back and vet these considerations and bring them forward so that the package you have the next time around will include a lot of these recommendations.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Wertheim. Commissioner Moore, did you want to?
No, I just wanted to add the question of Ms. Sullivan was quoting 8 exceptions for large development sites, that would be clarified for us as well. Those are very, very into the weeds questions, which are sometimes a little bit harder to understand when you sit here and take on the whole complexity of the project.
Yeah, well, I just first want to say it's really nice to have other people reading the code in the same detail as me, because they have caught a bunch of tweaks and mistakes and like total missequencing of words. And when you write 619 pages of code or whatever it is, that's going to happen. So it's been great. One of the things that they brought up, for example, is that the key development sites wouldn't be able to avail themselves of the other flexibilities for sites in 329. That's not our intent. The intent is to have subsection D still apply, and then subsection E is a whole nother additional flexibility. I will check with the zoning administrator, et cetera, to make sure the language is tight, but that is our intent.
So we would be copied on your memo in order to track that these questions are answered within the general complexity.
Sure. I mean, if we have the issues consideration memo today, that every time we make changes, there's also a memo that says changes that have been made. So we'll just keep, and my goal next time would be just walk through everything that's different between the package that you received the first time out and later, and just obviously be as transparent as possible so you can, because trying to find the changes in the code is ridiculous. So instead of have a memo that says, if you want to compare, here's what's different, and the rationale. So I always do that in the presentations I give you, is what's changed and why it's changed.
Thank you. Commissioner Koppel.
Yeah, forgive my mistake. Who was exactly addressing the tower separation issue? Just one simple question. Is it close, or is it, not to say are the buildings too close, but if it's, say, 115 feet of separation, what are we looking at as of now? Is it even a little?
Tara Sullivan, Rubin, Junius and Rose. I'm speaking to a particular key development site, but this also applies to a lot of development sites, all 8, because we understand that there are other Recon Hill and there are other large sites with multiple towers, but the key development sites are very unique, almost in the city. They are very large parcels with 2 to 3 to 4 buildings on them at times. And so oftentimes it is 75 to 85 feet, give or take. And it's also, this is really getting into the weeds, but how the mid-rise tower versus a tower is defined. And you want to scale it around, but it's a combination of the heights with the definitions and the tower separation. And those 8 particular sites are very unique compared to everything else.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just in general, I'm willing and open to looking at the more granular details when we do hear this next time. And again, definitely in favor of the Good Jobs program. Really still happy to see the Sustainability District going forward, and I'm really in favor of expediting approvals if developers are willing to commit to what is asked for as far as tenant protections, worker protections, prevailing wage, skilled and trained workforce, but not just intentions to do these commitments instead of intentions is what I'm getting at. And really looking forward to getting this right the next time.
Commissioner Moore.
I want to make a comment on tower separation. It is not just first come, first serve, and the second party, which would be affected by the ruling, basically ends up with nothing. I've always asked the department to look at it in a creative way, because if tower separation has a reason, and I do believe it does, then I think it is a creative solution, looking at both or other sites in context with each other and what is possible, rather than one acing out the other.
Commissioner Richards.
2 points. I think last time we talked, when Mr. Vettel got up and he said there's a site right next to another site, and we said we'd like for staff to kind of model these out. I mean, if we're dealing with 5 feet or something, I don't know how perceptible 5 or 10 feet is, but I think we're open to making things work.
Yeah, thank you. We modeled that out. We kept it very brief today. We can show you that model next time. I think there's 2 sites in question with tower separation issues. One is a development with 2 towers, and so they're worried about the relationship between the towers themselves. That's a key site, and thus would be enabled under our intention that they wouldn't have to stick to the tower separation requirements. You'd have the flexibility to decide if the architectural merit deserved a narrowing of the limits below 80 feet. That's the intent. Well, again, we'll check with the zoning administrator and make sure that's the case. The other site you've heard a couple times from Mr. Vettel, et cetera, is 2 sites right next to each other, and they're just totally abutting each other, and that becomes a real challenge for them to build. They basically would have 30 feet between the 2 of them, and we'll show you what that might look like.
Great. I think to Commissioner Koppel's point, Mr. Wu, I think he was referring to a lot of the things that you had mentioned in your public comment, that we're looking for more, like send us an email or something so that we can actually see what it is that you're specifically asking for that we can consider as policy.
Yes, somebody needs to make a motion. Yes.
Motion
Commissioner
to
Koppel.
continue the certification of the EIR to May 10th.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion, then, to continue the certification of the final environmental impact report to May 10th. And just for the benefit of the public, the other items will also be considered on May 10th. On that motion, Commissioner Fong? Aye. Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
And Commission Chair Melgar?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 6-0.
That's it.
That's it. So with that, the meeting is adjourned.